So my name is Adam Wierman. I'm a faculty here at Caltech. I also am an advisor, founding advisor for Varus, which is a company that deploys hyperscaler data centers from ground up. So I have a foot both on the sort of research side. Oh, do you want me on the mic? Okay. So I have a foot both on the research side and on the deployment side. So I can talk and answer questions from both perspectives. I've been in this space for almost 20 years now. So our group here at Caltech deployed the first net zero data center fully powered by renewables up in the Bay Area. We also had the first deployment of data center demand response, in partnership with HP. We worked on geographical load balancing with Google, where you migrated load across data centers based on renewable availability and differing electricity costs. And a lot of my research focuses on the algorithmic, power adjustments, monitoring, control within the data centers. Although I, also do a lot of work understanding the impacts, in terms of carbon emissions, pollution, water, et cetera. So I'll do a little bit of an overview talk here, trying to give a perspective both on, potential drawbacks and opportunities coming from data center deployment. So I think given the talks we've heard, maybe I'll try to emphasize a little bit of the opportunity here in addition to challenges, because I do think that there are big opportunities here. So there's a reason why it's exciting, but also risky. Okay, so jumping in, we're at a point where when you hear AI, you probably have a, reaction to it, or whoever you are in the world, positive or negative, and it's the saint or the sinner, the hero or the villain, depending on the conversation. And this, affects everything. So, from a societal perspective, from a job perspective, from employment's perspective, from autonomous vehicles, all of these sorts of applications. And from an environmental perspective, it's the same hero-villain story. So it's the same story about, the advances coming from AI could revolutionize, chemical production, could revolutionize sustainability in many ways, better technologies. But as we're hearing about, it's a huge energy hog. It has a lot of environmental consequences as well. And how do you balance these when you discuss it? So in the industry world, this is the debate about the future. I think, here with people like we have in the room, it's the consequences today that we can't ignore. And so I think, just to give you that context a little bit more than what we've had today so far, when we think about this, when we think about AI driving this, we are getting to the point where we can understand what that means in terms of the environmental shift coming from the tech industry. And so here are a few examples, but maybe a number to keep in your head is the fact that Google turned on AI search means that each search query is about 10x the energy cost. And that's just the inference of it, not the training that went into building the model. And so similarly, when you do image editing with AI versus a non-AI tool, you're talking about an order of magnitude increase in the energy consumption coming from doing this. And so that, combined with just the excitement about deploying AI in lots of different aspects of our lives, from consumer-facing to back-end industrial, means that things are growing, and things are growing massively and quickly in any scale you want. I mean, it's long past the point where AI is needing as much energy as a country. It's more about what percentage of your country's usage is being devoted to AI these days. And many countries, Ireland, for example, is pushing 25 or 30% of the electricity usage of the country going to data centers. And because of this massive growth, companies that had for a decade been pushing sustainability and climate mitigation as part of their identity have given up on this. So Google and Microsoft, I could go down the list. Their climate pledges are gone at this point because they can't keep them while managing the growth that they are trying to achieve with respect to AI. And it's important that it's not just energy. Today we've heard mostly about energy, a few mentions of other things, but water is a significant impact of data centers as well, one that's felt dramatically locally. And so this is an example of an article about Meta's data center 2 years ago or so now, where you come into a county and you use 6 times the daily water usage of the entire county prior to the installation of the data center. And so they're big, they can have impact, and it's just the beginning. So coming back to that question, I love framing it in terms of this question, but think to yourself for a second. I won't ask you to answer, but think to yourself for a second where you put the value of this for society. What fraction of our societal electricity usage should go to data centers? There are many different answers that you can try to justify here. When I have a lot more time, we have a little discussion here about what the answer is for different people in the audience and why, so you can see how varied people's answers are, even within a narrow band of the society. And now, where is it today? This is an older study, so you can see it includes 2024 as future, but I like to use it because most studies are very broad strokes in putting forward what they expect to happen in the industry, and it's kind of just line curve fitting. This one by LBNL was actually done based on using orders for hardware from companies from the 5 to 7 year horizon. So this was not an estimate based on fitting some projection for the future. These were orders on the books already, where money had exchanged hands, and so this is real, and you can see that the reality since then has matched these trends. And so you look to 2028, and you're talking about 10 to 15% in not just 1 or 2 states, but in dozens of states around the U.S., and more than 25% in some. Virginia is already well over the 25% of the state electricity usage being devoted to data centers. If we look at California, it's about 4% today of electricity usage in data center goes to electricity usage in California goes to data centers. But you look in some locales, and we heard about Santa Clarita in Sarah's talk, 50%. Some would say it's pushing 60% of the electricity usage in Santa Clarita is going to data centers. Santa Clara, sorry. I'm reading my slide rather than thinking. Thank you. Typo. Now I jumped the gun after clicking that. So now we come to an answer from somebody important in this space to that question about how much we should expect going forward of societal electricity usage going to data centers. So Eric Schmidt, about a year ago now, testified to Congress that the national priority for our national security was pushing AI and allowing our growth to be able to compete internationally in that space, and that to do that, we should be throwing energy in all forms at it as quickly as possible, and that our target should be 99% of total generation devoted to data centers. So I see a lot of head shaking. I think I've yet to present this in a room where there was unanimous agreement with this statement. But this is something that is having an impact on our national priority right now. And when you look at our FERC chair, this is a quote from not too long ago. My priority as chairman is to ensure that our country can connect and power data centers as quickly and as durably as possible. And so this is where national policy is right now, and as a result, you're seeing actions like EPA not setting nationwide standards and actively reducing nationwide standards around these deployments. And so this pushes to the points we heard in the first 2 talks, where decision-making here needs to be done locally. You all and people like you in positions around the country are the ones who are going to set the regulation and the controls on how and where data centers are deployed. There is going to be a lot of pressure to deploy them quickly and at large scale. And it is important to do that. It's 99% is extreme, but there's a lot of reasons why we need to expand capacity of data centers in the next 5 years. But the community impact of it needs to be paid attention to, and that falls on local government to do. Now, that was electricity. Water. Water's a different story. I don't think the same question is relevant for water. It's not relevant whether water is 1% or 5% of the national number, because water is seasonal, local, non-dispatchable. You can't build a snowpack where you need it to help your water usage in a particular location where you want to build a data center. And the numbers are smaller, so there's a lot of controversy around water in the press and in the popular world that you've probably seen. People arguing that it's less than bottling, or there's so many other bigger usages around, and it's true, right? 1 to 3%, greater than 5% in some states is about where you should expect water usage to be. That's significant, but not enormous. The difference is the impact on a local. So when you're talking about a data center and its impact on local communities, data centers are different. It's not as if water comes in and goes out like a house, and you consume very little of it in your residential household. So the consumptive ratio of a data center is about 7x what it is for the rest of the water users in a location. The peak to mean ratios are enormous. 6 to 10 is a lower bound, and this was from some recent research at Caltech that we tried to reverse engineer this information from data center public data sheets. And the capacity is managed very differently. So, I know we have some people from water companies here, right? Water companies are small, 1,000, 2,000, households. Infrastructure is usually close to capacity. There's not a huge amount of flexibility. Data centers can come in and, like the story I showed you about Meta, really overwhelm that capacity very quickly, almost immediately. And there are many examples of this in recent years, where companies come in and need to invest to improve the infrastructure for water in order to be able to build. But when you see a story like this, it looks positive, right? They're spending $400 million on public water systems in this area. They are also guaranteeing the remaining usage of the entire watershed of that region. And this is the infrastructure they need to be able to do that. And so, there's a couple of other examples where, the public, outreach for the Progress project is that, Google or Amazon or OpenAI will fund the water expansion infrastructure, all that's necessary for this project, 100%. But the reason they're doing that is because they are the only user for that expansion of the water infrastructure. And so it comes back to understanding the impact and making sure a community is actually getting value rather than just, subsidizing. And on the company side, this is a big deal. So water access was a major risk factor in SpaceX's IPO, for example, around XI data centers. Now, those are the high level. I think one of our failures in the research community over the last decade is we spent 10 years focusing on carbon emissions of data centers and things like this, a little water, but global sorts of impacts of these factors rather than local community impacts. And as the curve has started to scale dramatically over the last 5 years, there's been a refocusing on those local impacts of data centers in the community, and we understand a lot more. There's still a lot to understand, and so not everything you see in the press is real around these issues. There's a lot of things that are overblown and are stated more aggressively than we really understand them to be, but there are lots of issues in a lot of categories, and so I'll walk through a few. So we talked about energy usage. Energy usage and capacity, yes, that's a big deal for a local community, but also is power quality. And so when data centers come into a community, if it's not done well, they can actually lead to really increased numbers of brownouts and power outages in that community. And why? Just to give you a little bit of a sort of tech, a little bit of a cartoon overview here. So when you come in with an AI data center, it is not a flat amount of energy that the data centers required. This used to be the case for data centers a decade ago. They were pretty flat, pretty predictable. With an AI workload, there are very big spikes. Nearly the full capacity of the data center can be spiked in 10 seconds or less. And so managing that as a utility is a problem. And so you need to be paying attention to that as you're partnering with a data center. Otherwise, those spikes can lead to a blackout for the grid broadly. But that's one direction. It's also the other direction that's a problem. So if you are a utility and you're managing fluctuations from renewable or fluctuations for load spikes, whatever the cause is, that can lead you, this is just, think of these as barriers. If you go above that barrier, it's bad. So you can have some voltage fluctuation that takes you into a point where you're in trouble and you're trying to manage a potential blackout. What does a data center do in that situation typically? They just disconnect, because they don't want their servers to be subject to voltage fluctuations. That's bad. Their servers are expensive. They have to protect them at all cost. And so then you have a massive load on your system that, because you were struggling, drops off, and now you're in big trouble. And so then again, blackouts or brownouts are problems, right? And so these are well-demonstrated effects that have been happening in communities that are not paying attention when they negotiate and put constraints on the grid interconnect. There are also things that we know how to solve from the last 20 years of research in data centers. So these are not open problems for engineering. They're things that the companies can solve if they are required to. Okay, so that's power quality. Water shortages, I partnered with Bloomberg on this study. 72% of new data centers are in high stress water areas. And so, one really has to be aware of, what's going on with water in your local community as you talk about data centers and how they're going to manage water. Rate increases, we heard a little bit. This is one that I want to be, I'd say, a little cautious in interpreting studies. You see a lot of press around this. You even see a lot of legislators, reps talking about how data centers have led to, doubling utility costs and things like this. I'd say the jury's out academically about what actually the rate impacts of data centers have been. It's very much something that depends on the locale, how the markets are working in those locations. We were just talking here, Caltech's rate has been going up quite a bit. There's not because of data centers, right? There's it's hard to disentangle those things when you're studying what's from data centers, what's from upgrades, what's from all this. It's something that we're actively studying, and there's a number of groups in Southern California are actively trying to pull this out to understand where and what factors lead to rate increases from data centers and how they can be avoided. But we'll come back to this later. The key thing is you need to study it in your location to make sure that you understand the potential impacts, because you can't just assume it's one way or the other, and it is a potential risk. Health impacts is something that we haven't heard about today, but I think is really important. We pioneered studying this a few years ago at Caltech, and basically, you don't think of it, but data centers have these backup generators. We've been talking about them today as if they're backup generators that don't really run very much. They run a lot more than you think. And the health impact of data centers, just to give a sort of quantification, data centers nationwide, the pollution impacts and the health impacts that those cause are about the same as the health impacts from all of transportation in California. And so, you're talking about a significant amount of, asthma, heart problems, things like this coming from, the health impacts associated with data centers. And, to just point my finger at one here, we've heard about them already, but Colossus, the XAI, and now Anthropic rented data center in Memphis, they're using backup mobile diesel generators running almost all the time. And so this is what it looks like, in the community surrounding that data center. That's an extreme case, but if we think about Loudoun County and Northern Virginia, the health impacts of the pollution from backup generators there stretch all the way up the coasts of the Northeast. And so this is another situation where you build a data center, you make a cost-benefit analysis, the health impacts from the pollution from that data center impact 100 miles away plus. And so we need to be aware when we're thinking about this, that these aren't just data center backup generators that are used only in emergencies. They really do impact the communities. Noise, we heard a little bit of a mention of noise. It's a real concern. So if you don't design with respect to noise, there are problems. And in Northern Virginia in particular, the noise Regulations don't look at low decibel noise, which builds up, and they are also single source rather than paying attention to the fact that you might have multiple data centers nearby you, and that will add up. And there's a lot of issues that come if you don't think about this carefully as you talk about data center regulation. One that is definitely in the questionable category right now, but has gotten a lot of press recently, and a couple of you asked me about it, so I wanted to bring it up, is also heat islands. So there is a lot of heat generated by data centers. That's why there's so much cooling using the electricity. And there's recent studies arguing that this heat islanding actually affects communities and environmental regions nearby, potentially in the upwards of 5-ish degrees for tens of miles. And so managing heat has always been an important part of data centers in terms of the cooling, but also potentially in the environmental impact too. But again, this is very recent. This is a couple months ago, the first studies on this were coming out, and we don't know the extent yet. And I think one thing I also want to emphasize, which hasn't come up today yet, is that these really aren't felt uniformly, the effects of data centers. The 10 counties with the largest health impacts, for example, from pollution are all low-income communities. The Memphis example is a really telling example of a community that doesn't have the power to stop what's happening to it right now in terms of the data center regulation and the pollution that it's facing. And so we have to be aware of what communities are being targeted with deployments. And we have talked about this. Residents are saying no more. Many, many, many examples. I think Ireland is a great example, if you haven't read about it before, of a country that went all in on data centers and just eventually hit its limit, where the grid can't support anymore. They can't build generation to support anymore, and now new industry can't deploy because there isn't the power infrastructure to support it. And so they're having a lot of moratoriums and other things around that space. In the US, I think Sarah gave better stats around this than I have on my slide. So there's lots of pushback at this point. But given that we've heard mostly about pushback, I want to take a moment to say, are data centers really the problem here? And I'd actually argue, yes, they're not being good citizens in many ways, and they're not deploying as cleanly and environmentally as they could. But at the same time, data centers are a symptom of infrastructure that isn't modernizing efficiently, right? So if our grid were renewable, had large-scale storage deployed all around, and we had extra capacity, it wouldn't be a problem for a data center to come in because they could just be powered off of that, and their energy infrastructure, for example, wouldn't be bad. If the water infrastructure was modernized and scaled and had extra capacity, again, we could argue about how much we want to use and how to balance water usage with electricity, as I'll talk about in a second. But it's the lack of modernization of the infrastructure that data center deployments are exposing. And we should control and manage how they're doing that, but also there's and I guess just to emphasize, right, it's being stressed by many other things as well. Like in Pasadena, we're being stressed by, solar, how we need batteries where to avoid reverse flows in the grid and power outages that come with that, large-scale electrification of manufacturing, EVs, trucking, all of this are putting major big loads in our electricity grid that is causing it huge problems and creating a need for modernization that we don't have the political will to fund, right? And data centers, on the other hand, are large electric loads that have flexible demand that they can manage when they charge, especially if they have batteries on site. They can move their load around throughout the day. They can do so in a central way. So you're not dealing with 100,000 EV users. You're dealing with one company that can manage it. And they have capital that they're willing to deploy to improve the infrastructure that they're going to be using. None of those are true for the other entities that are coming in the electrification of transportation and industry and manufacturing. And so they are potentially the best or only partner for modernization of our infrastructure in the next decade if we don't expect that to come from government and funds directly. And so there's an opportunity there if it's done right. There's also clearly risk, as I spent the first, most of the talk talking about. There's clearly risk, but there's an opportunity there for a partner to help infrastructure modernization. And that's why I think having this sort of a room and building expertise is so crucial. Okay, and so in my mind, the question is, we're feeling the burden. They can potentially be assets. How do we turn this into a win-win? And so just to give you a few opportunity examples of how this can happen, and I'm a faculty member, I'm more on the engineering deployment side, so these are how do you manage the system well, in some sense, ideas. So the first one is, bring your own generator has been proposed, sometimes excitedly, and companies certainly love the idea of bring your own generator because then they can deploy quickly and they don't have to worry about grid improvements and et cetera, slowing down their deployment. It doesn't solve most of the problems for a community. It means that you lose control over the generation. The pollution impact is gigantic, and you don't have control over it other than monitoring and penalizing, as using Memphis again as an example. Generators are a big source of the noise in a community, and so that's going to lead to more noise mitigation problems around all that. Instead, and you don't get flexibility, right? They're not going to deploy their generator to help manage renewable integration into the grid, clean energy into the grid. On the other hand, if it's bring your own storage, you can do a lot of things. So if data centers are, instead of bringing generation, bringing large-scale energy storage, noise, no problem, pollution, no problem, added benefit, you get storage that can be deployed as flexible loads in your grid, which is really expensive to install yourself in your city. And if you can incentivize doing this flexibility as part of your negotiation process, which most data centers are very willing to do these days, you're in great shape. And so, I want to emphasize this plot is a little hard to read, I realize, but maybe just the point is to look at all of the sources of generation that are clean, wind, solar, et cetera, that you can handle in your deployment in your city if you have flexibility coming from data centers. Data centers can give you, 500 megawatts of storage that you can deploy flexibly and you don't have to pay for if you're a city doing a hyperscaler partnership. That's a huge win. For reliability. And this is not a 10-year project. Data centers can participate in demand response today. And so this is an example of a Google press release from a few years ago where they were doing demand response. And they were doing demand response in their data centers the hard way. They were doing it by actually moving AI training loads and delaying them, which many data centers will argue they really don't want to do. They can do, they don't want to do. If you have large-scale storage on site, they don't have to do any of the complicated moving their workloads around, any of the delaying training or delaying inference. They just have to manage their storage that's sitting out front of their data center. And they also then avoid the power quality problems because, if the grid is having, frequency problems, they can manage that and do ride-through with the storage sitting out front of their data center. So it solves a lot of the problems that I laid out just with managing and operating large-scale storage on the site of the data center. So that's what I was going to say. It helps with both of those. Cooling, opportunity 2. So normally when you hear about cooling, you hear about evaporative or non-evaporative closed-loop cooling, and you hear we really need to be going to closed-loop cooling to avoid water usage, and that's maybe we should you see some states trying to argue that maybe you do enforcement of only non-evaporative cooling, for example. I'm going to push back on that a little bit. So both of these styles of cooling have their pluses and minuses, and there's not a best fit for every location. So on the evaporative side, you're using big fans, so it's you're wasting water with this sort of evaporation. So it's high water usage, it's extremely noisy, that's why people move away from it. On the closed loop side though, and so here you see water usage during different months of the year, so when you're using cooling a lot, in the summer, the water usage is very high. On the other hand, if you're using dry cooling or some sort of closed loop, you're doing great for water usage, but in those same summer months, you're paying 30%, 40% more energy usage for the same cooling, which is likely happening right in that rising period at the end of the duck curve when the grid is really strained. It's probably not great for your energy infrastructure. And so what you need is to manage these smartly. And again, best practice is there are things you can do. There are known techniques that we've understood for a while that data centers can do. You can do a best of both. You can adaptively mix the type of cooling you do depending on the environment you're in to trade off energy and water. And most importantly, I highlighted the peak issue that we talked about before for water usage. Peak is what strains the infrastructure the most often. Water sites, water towers, the same thing that we want to do with energy storage to peak shave and not have peak electricity usage bother us. Water tanks on site used adaptively can manage and mitigate that peak. But nobody was talking about peak, and so utilities were not prepared, and so nothing like this is in regulation typically. Okay, so that's water, and again, this allows for peak shaving, balancing energy and water, and actually balances noise too, right? Because this is loud, this is silent. So if you want to mitigate noise at different times of day, you want to make sure you're not creating noise here at the same time as you're using your backup generator and creating noise there. You can manage a lot of this stuff adaptively. And again, this is happening. There are data centers. This is my company, Veris, but there's a lot of other ones as well. This sort of thing happens. It's not something that you can't ask for. It's deployable. It exists. It's known technology. Siting is the third one that I want to highlight. Siting matters a lot. And I was just talking in the break to some people where there's the reactive model of a community where you wait and data centers come to you and they have bought land and they're asking whether they can deploy. And there's the proactive model of laying out where you are willing to permit data centers. And if you are proactive, you can have data centers solve your problems in your infrastructure for you. And so a great example of this was this recent report on curtail to compute. Where, if we just think about California, 70% of our renewable is curtailed. Most of that comes from transmission bottlenecks, which means we're not putting our load in the right place. Data centers are great loads. If we place them in the right place, this is different, right? We can avoid curtailment. Site data centers in high curtailment regions. And so this is a figure from that report that we helped put together. And so you can see, there's some cities where there's huge curtailment. Dark red, orange is the curtailment rate. And so up here, you're getting lots of wasted renewables. Thinking about where and how to site data centers there, you're making use of renewable energy that is otherwise going to waste, as opposed to down here where curtailment isn't such an issue. And so siting matters, and it also matters in terms of infrastructure investment. If you need infrastructure investment, data centers are a great source of funds for infrastructure investment, allowing siting in locations where they will provide that infrastructure investment can be a win. Okay, and then the last one is more fun, not always possible, but heat management is a real thing, and if you are lucky enough to have symbiotic opportunities, you can do really creative things here. And so this is a project that I helped consult with that was in Finland and Sweden. We did a few versions of this where you actually use the waste heat from the data centers for community heating of the neighborhoods nearby. I'm also working on a project in Amherst on the East Coast around a similar idea. And so making use of the waste heat is a way, again, to avoid electricity, avoid noise, avoid heat islanding, avoid a lot of those issues. And there's lots of ways you can do it. So back in the day, about a decade ago, I worked with HP, and we did manure-powered data centers, where you actually, co-located with anaerobic digestion, and you took the manure from the cows, used the waste heat from the data center, and then the output power was used to power the data centers. Desalinization, carbon capture, there are deployments that are starting to use these sorts of approaches as well as uses of the waste heat. So heat is an output, but if you have things in your region where you can use that waste heat, that again is a great place for siting. It's something to take advantage of and use data centers as a benefit for the community rather than just a negative. Okay, so those are some examples of ways to create win-win opportunities to try to, highlight that it's not all bad when you have the opportunity to partner with a data center, but you do really need to do it carefully. And so just a few of the things I made these slides with the hope that many of them would already be discussed when we went through them. Just when we're thinking about energy, siting, grid integration is the one that I really want to highlight. So if you can get, on-site storage with grid integration and flexibility guarantees with the utility, they become a resource for your region as opposed to a drain on the electric system in your region. And this is possible now. And then, rate impacts, don't assume they're going to be significantly negative, but study them carefully and plan accordingly. This is very regional, very local. You need to understand how to manage the rates in your region if you're talking to a data center. Water, prioritize recycled water. I think many people want to say like there's a cookie cutter approach to how to do cooling that's best. I don't think so. I think you really do need to talk with the data center about how they're going to cool and how to manage that in your location, given the constraints around your region. Demand estimates here. This is an area where transparency is not standard and monitoring is not standard, and you need it because their estimates are going to be way off, and you need to monitor and be aware and keep them in check with water usage. Community benefit agreements, we heard about them. They're maybe a little less in favor than they used to be, but I think they're crucial to both of these in terms of win-win agreements. Community benefit agreements in terms of investment infrastructure are really crucial. And then moving on to like air pollution and noise. So air pollution, really avoid on-site generators. They're bad for all of these. Energy storage. You can do a lot with energy storage. You can really minimize the use of on-site generation. And noise, right? Again, don't trust the numbers on noise. So measure before deployment. Don't trust the nameplates on the devices. They're not accurate. They're way off in most cases. And make sure that they're already planned to put in noise barriers when they need them, because the initial deployment will not be the final size. They will keep adding. Noise will become more of an issue, and you want that to already be in place so that they can go up quickly when they're needed. Okay, so with that, I did want to say, so how do you get all this? I think we heard about negotiations in the base, but from the industry side, I want to emphasize one thing, which is absolutely the headline here. So tax breaks, all that stuff, yeah, they're great. The thing that matters right now to these companies is how quickly they can build, how quickly they can connect. So any incentive that you're going to try to do in terms of money is going to be dwarfed by any incentive you give in terms of time to deployment. And so if you want to encourage flexibility, for example, like grid integration and required flexibility whenever you have emergency events that they shut off 20% of their load and give you that flexibility, let them connect quicker. You don't have to pay them for it. You need to get them more quickly connected, and that will buy you that ability to negotiate it. Like 6 months, 3 months, anything to expedite that process is the thing that is way more important than dollars right now. And just to emphasize that, these are, again, a little old numbers because it's hard to get the accurate ones today for data centers, but the connection queues are ramping up even back in 2023. And the time to request, the time from request to operational was already at 5 years there, and as the mean, and it's up to like 7 now. And so if you can cut down that 7-year horizon for a company, you can get all of these things. And so that's your knob for negotiation for connection. That is the most important one. Okay, so summarizing my perspective here. So data center coming into community is a unique opportunity to invest in infrastructure. I think that's true, and I think we should make sure we don't forget that as we worry about all the things that can go wrong. But there is a big but. And the risk is significant, and the risk is felt by your local community, and local government, local utilities are the ones that are the first and only line of defense right now for this, given the federal policy. And unfortunately, I can't stand up here and say, design a data center in this way and everything will be fine. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. You have to work on evaluating your local impact to understand how to make these decisions, and there are lots of groups out there to help you do that. So I'll end there. These are some papers, if you want to read, from our group that are meant to be for a general audience in terms of evaluation of water and air pollution. So thanks.